It has been my position on this channel, and I have said it several times, that I strongly believe that based on the Second Amendment, that we have the constitutional right to have fully automatic weapons, short-barreled weapons, suppressors. Because how else are you to stand up to a tyrannical government without military weapons? And a lot of you are going to argue, well, but how do you stand up against a tank or a jet? Here's what millions of people with military weapons that do just fine. They'll do just fine. Believe me, they'll do just fine. Now, with that being said, I do want to say that clearly courts have not agreed with this statement. Based on when you look at, well, until now, but based on this, when you look at when the Second Amendment was written, the weapons that they carried around, those were military weapons. Those were the same weapons that they used in the Revolutionary War. It's the same weapons they used in the Indian Wars. It's the same weapon. It was a military weapon. And today, that's what a military weapon is. And is a fully automatic, or at least a burst mode. Now, courts, of course, have always disagreed, again, until now. Federal court now has said that, as a matter of fact, they are legal based on the Supreme Court. Now, before I get into this, I do want to take a moment and thank our sponsor, Jace Medical, for not just supporting this channel, but being the only company in the world where you can get pharmaceuticals, emergency pharmaceuticals, sent to you from a U.S. pharmacy, prescribed by a U.S. doctor in case of an emergency antibiotic, have your chronic meds, an emergency supply of your chronic meds, have antivirals on hand, have anti-COVID meds on hand. You can get all of these from Jace. Now, I can get a lot of these meds from my doctor. Some of them I actually can't, but most of them I can. But only when I'm sick. Jace is the only company that gives it to you before you get sick in case of an emergency. All right. Now, what actually happened with this case is it's incredibly fascinating because a federal judge, Judge John Broom, he's a district federal judge in Wichita, Kansas, was seeing a case of Morgan, who was being tried and prosecuted because he had an AM-15 300 blackout fully automatic weapon, as well as he had a Glock with a Glock switch in it. And Judge Broom said that, well, he threw the case out, ultimately saying that according to the Supreme Court, in the New York Rifle and Pistol Club versus Bruin case back in 2022, there was a statement, and we brought this statement up in several videos over the last couple years, that you have to look at tradition of history. You have to look at what were the weapons that they were referring to and what were the restrictions that were given when the Second Amendment was written. And there weren't any restrictions. There was zero gun restrictions in America when the Second Amendment was written. Now, some have argued that there were some restrictions that the Crown had when they had authority over this land, but that doesn't count. What was the restrictions in America under the American government? What were the restrictions? Well, there weren't any. So you have to look at historical tradition of what it was written. And ultimately what this judge quoted was saying that the court finds that the Second Amendment applies to the weapons changed because they are bearable arms within the original meaning of that amendment. In other words, that these are bearable arms. Like when that amendment was written saying that you have the right to bear arms for these reasons, like think about, well, why would you need to bear arms? It's not so you have the right to hunt. It's not so you have the right to sports shoot. It's so you have the right to defend yourself, your person, your family, your home, your property, your neighbors, and your country. Well, how are you supposed to do that? With bearable arms, with arms that actually allow you to then stand up against those things. And that's ultimately what he's saying. He also goes on to say that the government has the burden to show that the regulations is consistent with the nation's historical firearm regulation tradition. Really based on, because the Supreme Court said so. That's really why. Because they literally said so. And this is the first challenge to that, major challenge. To kind of say, well, wait a second, the Supreme Court just said that you have to look at historical tradition. Based on that, there were no restrictions. And based on what the Second Amendment was written for, these are bearable arms that we're talking about here. Now, so far, there's been no appeals. I'm sure I guess I'd be shocked if there weren't. But right now, there are no appeals. Prosecutors say that this whole case gives federal judges the ability to pick and choose the historical records in a way they think the Second Amendment should be read. And they're right. And that's why I'm going to argue that they're still not technically legal because of what he just said. So depending on where you are and what federal judge you see, for sure, if you have an automatic weapon and a cop catches you with it, you're going to get arrested, regardless of what this judge said. You're going to get arrested. If you have things like Glock switches or automatic weapons, you're going to get the attention of the ATF and you're going to get arrested is what's going to happen, regardless of what this judge has said and regardless of what the Supreme Court says. And could you then go to court and fight it and win? Well, yes, because that's what just took place here. But just like the prosecutor said, it gives federal judges the ability to pick and choose the historical records in a way they think the Second Amendment should be read. So you may get a judge that's like, of course, you're guilty, like you have an automatic weapon. This is against the law. And no, the Supreme Court didn't say you have the right to have that. So it depends on really which federal judge you get. It really kind of does give federal judges this freedom to kind of say, well, here's what tradition or history says, in my view, so to say. So I guess that answers the question really in the beginning is, are they legal now? Well, I would argue, of course they are. They have always been legal. But it's just how do certain authorities that be see it? How do they see it? Because even I kind of grew up in a small town. Well, it's a big town now, but it was a small town then. And the cops clearly ran the town. As a teenager, I remember a couple times having some issues and run-ins with cops. And, clearly there were legal boundaries crossed, let's say, in how I saw myself dealt with and how I saw my friends and loved ones dealt with at times growing up in that town, and the stories I heard. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter. They were the cops. It didn't matter that they were breaking the law. It didn't matter. They were the cops. And then the judge in town, that guy hated teenagers. He hated teenagers. You were guilty if you weren't above 50, pretty much. So, and that's just how it was. So I guess I share that story with you to say, no, they're not legal. You're going to be dealing with this. If you have an automatic weapon of any kind or you've modified a weapon to be automatic, according to the ATF, you've broken the law. According to me, you have not, but who am I? And according to this federal judge as well, and according to the Supreme Court as well, but how's that going to play out? It really does give federal judges and really all judges a little freedom to be able to make up their mind on what that actually means, that historical tradition. So there you go. That's kind of what it comes down to. Federal judge says, heck yeah, they are illegal. Supreme Court agrees, but good luck with that one. There you go. Any thoughts or insight on any of this? Definitely put that below. Do want to take a moment, say most people watch this channel, not subscribers. Click that subscribe button. It greatly increases the algorithm and our ability to get these messages out. That link is also below. But the most important part of this channel, we take prayer requests. So please don't ever hesitate to send that in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, and love guns.